We can go around real quick just because we do have our new council representative here. So I think you're already familiar with me. I'm Sean Irvine. I'm the Economic Development Director. Kate, why don't you go?
Kate Swarzler, owner of Indy Commons downtown.
Great. And Jasper?
I'm Jasper Smith. I live here in Independence.
Great. And then Counselor, you want to introduce yourself too?
I'm Sarah Jobe, Counselor for Independence.
Great. So actually the one action item would be to adopt the minutes from last time. So I guess we'll have to push that one to the next meeting. And actually this may be a quick meeting because I thought I was going to have some kind of fun river signage for you to look at, but it's so I'm part of, there's a Willamette River tourism studio that Travel Oregon has put together, and the idea is that it's to try to better connect all of the different kind of assets up and down the Willamette River, like literally from Portland all the way up into the upper reaches, even as far as like Oak Ridge. And so whether it's communities, whether it's put-ins and takeouts, whether it's campsites, just kind of trying to get all of those different segments better connected using the same kind of signage and safety messaging, and helping advocate for better access points, and this is for motorized and for non-motorized. And so one of the folks who's on we've got kind of a middle stretch that I believe is from, I think it's from Oregon City to about Corvallis. There's a state parks representative on there. And he actually reached out to me not too long ago, wanted to get together because they got grant funding for new river signage. So as you're floating down the river, they want to essentially put in like river mile markers and also like kind of destination signage. So if you're coming into Independence, if you're floating on the river, there would be a sign saying, City of Independence, there's camping, there's food, there's hotel, that type of a thing. So kind of amenity signage as well. We were going to get together first on the 12th and then on the 17th so that he could show me his draft ideas for this signage, which I wanted to take to you all. And he canceled on me both times. So, so I don't have the fun, exciting stuff to show you tonight. But that is something that I think is coming, is there's a lot of interest in recreation on the Willamette River. I think we probably all saw the interest in paddle sports in particular has been increasing pretty significantly the last few years, but this last summer, by all accounts, was just leaps and bounds, greater usage than any previous year. And of course, this summer everybody's expecting it to be the same, if not even more so. So there's, I think, a renewed interest and focus on how to better guide and utilize recreation on the Willamette, and especially for communities like ours, that how can we better take advantage of it, and get those kind of folks stopping here for their on their to stock up and buy food and just ideally spend some money in town as part of their trip. So that's kind of where that signage piece came from, and it actually kind of rolls into some of the next agenda item, which was just a couple of kind of informational about a couple of grants that we've put in. One of which is actually to design and permit better paddlers access in Riverview Park. I'm going to share my screen here just real quick so y'all can kind of know. Oops, Jason, can you let me share my screen? If you haven't walked away.
Give it a try now, Sean.
Great, thank you. All right, gotta get the right thing pulled up here. There we go. All right, so you should be able to see a kind of a Google Map aerial here, and you can see right now most folks are kind of parking here in the parking lot and then essentially walking down the bank, either down this way, but usually kind of down at the end of C Street to launch their canoes and kayaks. And so what we did was we put in a grant to the Marine Board to design kind of real paddlers access down here. And some examples, if you've been to Hood River, they've got a good example of what we're kind of looking at, which is sort of these big, essentially gravel, they call them river steps, but they're, 10, 12 feet wide, maybe only, 8 inches deep, but they just sort of slowly step down into the river in a curve, so that as the river level goes up and down, you can still sort of launch easily from whatever that level is. And then of course we've got this big gravel bar here. So in the summertime, it would just sort of lead you down to the gravel bar, but sort of be an easy pathway to walk down instead of having to scrabble down the riverbank. And then the other part of it is we're hoping to be able to also design ADA accessible access down to the gravel bar. And that's frankly going to be more challenging just because of the steepness of the bank, because it'll have to be some type of a ramp system. But we've got kind of a tentative draft plan from our park master plan project that would have a ramp essentially kind of coming down this way and sort of slowly kind of coming down and connecting back up with the river steps, which would come down here. So this grant would essentially, if we get it, it'll fund all of the design and engineering work to get us to a point where we can where we can prepare and submit the permits to Department of State Lands and the Army Corps of Engineers to get this project approved, because it will require some work below ordinary high water, which requires a fair bit of environmental permitting to make sure you're not causing harm to endangered species and things like that. So that is in. We should find out probably June-ish if whether we received it. If we do, it should be a fairly straightforward. We'll do a quick request for proposals in terms of architectural design services, and then the project, we should be able to get it banged out within a year. The nice part is, if we get this grant, we get the permit, we get everything sort of set, the permits submitted. If assuming we get the permits approved, this same grant will be available 2 years from now, and it can also be used for construction. And it has a very potentially a high dollar limit. Like we can potentially get $500,000 to $1 million for construction, and so we can essentially come back to this same funding source to actually build the paddlers access. And of course, if we're successful, then that would be a real significant amenity for paddlers in this region. I think would really help continue to draw people to the community for recreation purposes. And then I think the other one, I had hoped to get it. So we had put in back actually a year ago to the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department local government grant program. You recall, I think in 2018, maybe it's 2019, we did a master plan for kind of the lower portion of Riverview Park. This parking lot here is essentially a remnant from the 60s or 70s when there was a motorized boat ramp here and you had to park boat trailers. It's not necessary to be this shape anymore. And kind of with Independence Landing Park here in the amphitheater, we wanted to kind of rethink this whole area. And so we did, and we put in for a grant that would reshape this parking lot, retain the same number of spaces, but reshape it in a more kind of attractive and user-friendly way, create some more green space here, and it would allow a trail connection that would be able to connect from here all the way up to the Willamette River Trail up here, without making you essentially walk down a parking lot or a drive aisle. Unfortunately, we were not successful with that one, but we're going to keep working on funding sources, because that would have been a really nice connection to be able to have the funding to build, design and build both the paddlers access and the parking lot reconfiguration here. So any questions about that? So then one other grant that we actually just submitted for is also a design grant. This was what's called the Oregon Community Paths Grant. And this is a grant through ODOT, and it's for building off-street, multi-use, non-motorized trails. So you'll recall we have about 2.5 miles of river frontage up and down the Willamette here. It goes all the way up here, Independent Sports Park, down to Riverview Park, and then for now it ends right here at the Civic Center, right where the Independence Landing Park comes out. We have property to essentially continue this trail south here, running along the river. And then there's an old rail bed that continues along here and comes out right about here. So we can essentially, continue to extend this trail almost another mile south of City Hall, to where it pops out down here. Would be a real nice amenity in terms of being able to extend. I mean, the Willamette River Trail gets used heavily. And so it'd be a great way to extend it. It'd be a more natural experience, kind of coming down here right along the river in the trees. And then it also has the opportunity to be a nice transportation connection, as this whole area continues to be built out. And if we're able to build this Southern Arterial connection going this way. So you'd be able to kind of run down that Southern Arterial on your bike or walking, hop on this trail and kind of run up to downtown that way. So this was a design and engineering grant, again, to get us to 25% design, kind of basically help us figure out where this trail would go, because we have the property, but we've done essentially no design work to kind of figure out the details, that would get us to a point to be able to actually fund construction. Kate, did I see that you had a question, or were you just moving something? Okay. So, and this one also, it's a combination state and federal funding source. And this is another one where if we're successful with the design grant, we can get this thing designed, and then we can essentially come back to them 2 years later, and they will also fund construction. And this one in particular has a very favorable match funding. It only requires a 10% match for the grant. So, if it was going to cost $1 million to build this trail system, we would only have to come up with $100,000 of other funding to be able to match that project. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Both of those grants just went in, and they're both just design grants. So it will be, it will still be, a couple of years before we could really look at any type of actual construction. Questions on that?
Yeah, I think you kind of answered my question, I guess, for both of them was kind of how they connect to other planning. And so one was around kind of, there was talk about kind of grading the Riverview Park so people could see the river from the amphitheater and kind of what you mentioned about the parking lot. So I was just wondering what was happening with that, but it sounded like it didn't get the grant and there's not necessarily planning on that right now.
I would say we did not get the grant. We moved, I'd say, far enough forward with a kind of an alternative design concept. So we got the really nice design concept from the landscape architects, which is sort of the all the bells and whistles. And so then we kind of said, okay, well, what if we're only able to scare up, half or a quarter of the funding needed to do all the bells and whistles? What could we do that would still be an approximation of that, and get us, as much bang for the buck. So we kind of went a little ways down that path, just with our city engineer, Steve Ward. And, now we're essentially, I'd say, kind of in a holding pattern until we can, scare up some funding or decide whether we really want to try to go in and allocate a significant chunk of funding for it.
Yeah, and then my other question was kind of similar, like with the southern path, would that kind of connect with some of the transportation system planning if they were doing something different at the bridge, or kind of, because I know that's an intersection they're looking at, and or connections going, west, or would kind of the trail planning and the transportation system planning be connecting or communicating in some way?
Yes, for sure. And that's and really that was part of my pitch in the grant to ODOT, because their concern is transportation, not recreation. So I essentially had to pitch this trail here as a transportation corridor, that will also be used for recreation, not a
Right.
recreation trail. And really the argument was, we have plans for this southern arterial that's going to run all the way, out to Talmadge Road here. And then the idea is you've got Inspiration Garden and the linear park here. We continue to run this south, and so you can connect up with the arterial here. Eventually, there will be a trail system running along the South Fork of Ash Creek that would link up. So you have sort of these fingers of trail systems. You've got the power line corridor that's coming down this way. So you've got these fingers of trail systems that are going south, north, south. They would link up with the southern arterial, which would have a kind of a grade separated, kind of 12-foot, 16-foot wide multi-use path next to it that would run you down to the river and kind of funnel you down to the river. So if anybody sort of in this area wants to go downtown, they might go up to Monmouth Street and go that way. But if they're looking for a much more enjoyable experience, they're going to come south, hit the path there, go to the river, and then go north that way.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, now we're going to use millions of dollars to do it.
We need to win the lottery, the trail lottery. Yeah, I've noticed just a big uptick in, people walking on the path, and especially now that it's paved all the way down to the boat ramp. I think before it was more people would come down there and they'd walk it if they happen to be here, but with it paved the entire way, now I see lots of people that will park at one end of it and then walk it for exercise. So I just think it's a great option to be able to expand on that trail, and definitely see a lot of boaters being, kayakers and just recreation down there in the park, and having to kind of scramble down the bank now, kind of the end, similar to where closer to the hotel. And it just seems like that's getting more and more eroded over time. And it would be nice to have, a planned option that helps control some of that.
Yeah, well, it's nice. The end of C Street is the old ferry landing, and so there's even some historic connections that can be made there.
Mhm.
Well, it'll be interesting, to get into the design of this part, because we've always kind of envisioned this as the more natural experience, and we haven't honestly committed to, is this going to be paved or not paved, like a gravel trail. We would like for it to be paved just because that's more accessible to more people. And it's funny, it wasn't until I became a parent that I realized that, ADA accessibility also means people with strollers, but then again, there's a lot of trees, there's a lot of, geographic issue, or, just topography issues. So we may or may not, we'll have to dig into it before we can really figure out what is feasible for this area. But our hope is to be able to run some kind of a paved multi-use path through here. And then of course, ideally be able to run some, maybe some soft surface offshoots onto the island here, because the city does own this island.
That'd be great. That'd be really a nice kind of addition.
Yeah. Yeah. I still, there's this land bridge that gets, kind of in the middle of summer, it's open, and, it's actually in our parks plan that this becomes a trail like a soft surface trail connection to get out here. And, I'm not quite sure if we would just leave it as a, kind of a rough trail. I mean, I'd love to be able to put in like a more formalized, bridge or big culvert or something to be able to get people across here. But, that'll be a challenge for another day, I think. I do still remember when because we acquired this property with the Independence Landing site, and the first summer we had it, the YMCA actually held a zombie survival camp for elementary school kids out here. they came out here and like built shelters, and then like the final day of the week-long thing, a bunch of parents went out there and dressed up as zombies and had they did this whole thing. It was sounded pretty cool.
Yeah.
I don't understand how that didn't become an annual event.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So Any other questions about that? You can kind of see in terms of the redesigning this whole area, the goal really is, the primary goal is we take this trail and connect it over here, without having to cross the parking lot. So, doing some kind of a thing, that gets it that way. Like I said, we've got an alternative that you sort of reshape, you sort of widen this area a little bit for parking on both sides. You pull this side back a little bit for green space over here, and then you can kind of run the trail along here and then bump it across, have sort of a raised crossing over here and have it run back behind the playground. That's kind of our lower budget alternative, where you just basically kind of saw cutting off some of this concrete or some of this asphalt and expanding a little bit here and making a little bit more of a kind of a plaza type area there. But we'll have to just kind of wait and see what kind of funding we can pull out of places. The other item that was on the agenda, and this is a conversation I know I'm going to be having, so I want to just kind of get some feedback on it. You'll recall in 2019, we had a pop-up kayak and stand-up paddleboard rental outfit that was operating right here on this little concrete pad. They were, we ran it as a concession. The city got 5% of the gross, and it, it was very successful. You would come here, you would rent your kayak or stand-up paddleboard, and then they would put you in a van with a trailer and run you up to Buena Vista. You put in there and then float back down and take out right here. And it was a very, very convenient system. So that Woodward Surf Company ran that, and they are very interested in doing that again this summer. And they actually are looking at potentially expanding their offerings into doing more of a formal tour as well. So you've actually got like a tour guide with you for groups. But they're interested in, they would like some kayak storage in the area. You recall they had basically just kind of a cargo trailer sitting out here. And what they'd like to do is essentially get a shipping container or something like that located down here, so that they can essentially leave a bunch of their kayaks and gear down here, at least for the season, if not year round. Like I said, I'm going to be meeting with them to talk this through. My inclination is that if it's going to happen, it would happen up over here by this is where the Western Oregon University's crew shed is, where they store their crew shells. We already have one Connex container out here that stores all of our summer series fencing and other things. So I don't necessarily think it would be a horrible thing to have a second Connex just sitting right next to it, but I'm interested in your thoughts on it.
I had no idea that was a WU. I just always assumed that was our public works. I didn't even know they had a crew team. Is it active?
It is. So, and this is something else I'm looking into, because Western actually axed the program a couple years ago, but the Salem Rowing Club was apparently also using it somehow in conjunction with this. And so there was quite a kerfluffle about that at the time. The bottom line is WU paid to build that shed. And they lease the ground from us for $1 a year or something like that. So it's theirs until they're willing to give it up. But I am looking into whether they're willing to give it up, because that would be extremely convenient for us.
Yeah. Yeah, to me it seems, especially if I think people really liked having the paddleboard kayak stand there in the park, and it seemed like that brought a lot of value to the area, and giving them some place where they could store things, makes sense, and having it be a little bit out of the way and not an attractive nuisance in the sense that maybe, people would, I don't know, try to vandalize it or get a kayak at midnight or whatever. However they would use it. It seems like that's a good location for it over by the camp post also. And
Yeah, and be able to keep an eye on it a little bit better. The other advantage is those things can be moved if necessary. If it's, this area does not flood very often, but, if necessary, we can always get those connexes onto a truck and get them out of the way.
Or maybe Woo will rent us their shed.
That's what I was thinking would be kind of ideal. If you already have it there and it's not really adding anything to just let someone else use it.
Yeah. I would be willing to bet it is still full of crew equipment. So that'll be the only potential challenge there.
Interesting.
Might be another type of boating on the river they can offer.
Yeah. And then there was actually one other thing that, again, is more of something that's kind of in the offing that I wanted to make you guys aware of. So with this Willamette River Tourism Studio, one of the things that keeps coming up is this idea of kayak racks and kayak lockers. So, the idea being you've got people floating down, maybe they're on a multi-day trip, maybe they're just on a long day trip, but they're floating by Independence and they stop and say, oh, what a great town. I'd love to go, have a beer at the pub or go buy some groceries or whatever, but I don't want to leave my kayak sitting here all by itself with nobody to watch it. And so the Kaiser Rapids apparently put in one of these a while ago, and they literally call it a kayak rack. And it's just something you can stick your kayak onto and lock it to this rack so that you can feel comfortable somebody's not just going to pick it up and walk away with it. There's been sort of steady interest in kind of creating a unified kayak and canoe, paddlecraft rack design that could be placed, up and down the Willamette for this purpose. And I got to say, for a long time, I was kind of not a naysayer, but kind of that's interesting idea, but is anybody really going to use that thing? And just the last few weeks, I've had multiple people approach me about, hey, it'd be really nice if you guys could do this because I would use it. And so the group doing the tourism studio is actually working with a senior engineering class at Oregon State as like a capstone project. Essentially said, okay, design us one of these things. Like you tell us, here's the specs. It's got to hold at least 6 watercraft. It's got to have lockers so that you can lock up your life jackets and your your overnight bag or whatever, so that doesn't walk off with with anything either. It's going to be it's got to either be flood proof or movable, so that it can be relocated. And so then they're going to come back and essentially propose a design. First off, what are your thoughts in general on it? Second, any thoughts on design, things that should be included? And then third, if we were going to put one or more of these things somewhere in Riverview Park, where should we do it?
Yeah, I just wouldn't want any one use to kind of dominate the riverfront. I mean, I just think it should be open for multiple uses, and so whoever wants to, for kids playing or people boating, whatever, it'd be nice to have it accessible to everybody. So if it's going to be placed somewhere, or maybe somewhere where it's not in the way of other uses, and maybe not right on the water, but off a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's the boat version of a bike rack, and I think about the people, and I've done it. You put in at Buena Vista, and you go to Rogue and be able to pull your boat out there. It's not as much use, but I could see where people would be more comfortable if they had a place that they could actually put things, and if they wanted to stay and watch a concert or there's some activity going on downtown, I think it could provide a pretty interesting alternative for people to be able to get to the park and then have a place that they knew they could safely put things for a couple hours and walk up and get lunch or go walk around town for a while. I think from a tourism standpoint, that could be really good. So I'm all for it. And I think there would be a way to kind of place it nicely, especially if they're, you know, maybe it's kind of by the put in space or somehow integrated into that design.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, the hotel is actually one of the ones who's been suggesting this, and they're actually willing to help do it. Essentially, you know, they've said, you know, you figure, you know, we'd love to see this happen and figure out, you know, if you can figure out what you want to do, we'll be happy to help you guys do it in some way. So that's, yeah, I think there's some really interesting possibilities there. Well, what I'll do is, you know, when we get a proposed design back from those from the engineering students, I am planning on bringing it to this group, just to, you know, take a look at it and say, you know, is this the kind of thing that we would want to see on our riverfront in Independence? You know, I think that's going to be the ultimate test. And then if so, you know, where and frankly, how many? Because I know, you know, a lot of people like to paddle in groups, and so you can fill up a 6-slot rack pretty quickly, I would imagine. Well, that is the extent of the main kind of things I wanted to bring to you. The other piece on the agenda, I think, you know, relates a little bit to what we were talking about before the recording started. You know, is, you know, these meetings have kind of, I think, ended up more or less happening quarterly, just kind of by default, both in terms of lack of agenda items and lack of attendance. But and so I kind of put on the question, you know, the agenda, you know, the question of, do we want to kind of shift these to just more of a quarterly meeting? But I guess I'm also interested to ask you all what you'd like to see this group, what you would like to see this group be. It can be a sort of an informational, you know, kind of report out and occasionally make decisions on things type of body, or it could potentially be a pick a project and work on it kind of a body. And I'm always, you know, well aware that most of the folks on these types of groups have already 24 other things going on. So I don't want to kind of unilaterally start shoving projects that I'm suggesting you guys volunteer on down your throats. But I'm just interested to have a conversation about that. I think it'll also go towards, you know, if we're talking about trying to, you know, find people to fill slots if folks aren't attending regularly. You know, we may be looking for different types of people depending on how that answer is answered.
Go for it, Jasper.
Go ahead.
I'm biased, but I think that of all the places that I've lived, the amount of recreation that is right outside people's doors here or very accessible is pretty exciting. And so I'm in favor of getting a more active group together. That's, I mean, so I look at it a little bit like the Planning Commission has gotten fairly proactive about, you know, yes, there's certain things that, you know, we vote on and keeping the code updated and all that kind of stuff, but also then looking ahead as to what are some of the issues coming down the road and kind of tackling some of those a little more proactively. So I think it's a pretty fantastic area. I'm actually surprised that there aren't more people kind of dialed into that Parks and Rec scene with how active things are with like the biking community, the river being right there, even, you know, active sports, the youth sports. I think there's plenty of topics that we could tackle, and now we're kind of volunteering you, Sean, for recognizing, right, you know, someone from the staff side, right, has to have time to dedicate, you know, to pushing some of those things forward as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's a valid thought. So are you thinking, I want to make sure I'm kind of understanding what kind of things you're interested in. Like, are you interested in more, you know, something, because there's sort of organizing a weekly walking and running club, you know, there's that type of recreation. And then there's more sort of the having a conversation about how do we fund youth sports in the community, or something like that. I guess where are you guys kind of falling in that type of a spectrum?
I would say from my standpoint, I don't necessarily want to be the one, or I don't even know that it's having a city committee is the right body to be organizing like the runs and the without a dedicated parks division or staff member even. I think a volunteer group, that would be a lot for a volunteer group to take on. But looking at the overall park system, and I guess since, and maybe I'm sure this has probably happened in the past, but having a good understanding of what is the vision for the parks within the community and how much passive recreation versus active, and like Jasper was kind of talking about, we've got these trail systems. How does that tie into the transportation system? And what is kind of the 20-year vision for what this could be like? And then I think that naturally kind of looks at, well, who are some of maybe the partners in the community, whether it's a YMCA or somebody else that could help support with that. Unfortunately, at the city level, even if there was like a part-time park, right? I guess there really isn't like a Parks and Rec director or manager at the city, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, no.
Right. To me, that would be ideal if the city had somebody like that to be able to focus on even renting the parks out, managing that whole, aspect of use at the park and the permits, and maybe even being able to then dedicate a little bit of time towards organizing or working with partners that would organize and activate some of the parks with programming.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'd love to see more recreational programs and things, but I think absent kind of city funded, I don't think that's something Kate and I can do as as the two members of this. But I think it would be great. I mean, I think demographically, Independence is in a good place in terms of, you've got lots of, families and children, and the demographics of other communities are different, but we have kind of that full spectrum of ages, and for kind of recreation for older people and for kids and families. So it'd be great to have that type of thing. But and I think we can maybe have a role in terms of envisioning and advising, but in terms of implementing, and especially if we meet quarterly, we would just slow everything down to have it go through us.
Mm-hmm.
But I would love to be a part of, because with the transmission system plan, that may open up, different ideas for trail connections, or if the city has to acquire land for a road, it may also relate to park area, or, I think there's lots of kind of intersections that be good to be a part of, but programming is maybe, I mean, it would be great to advise on, but and even parks, we can advise, but, and we can clean up or something sometimes, but.
No, that makes sense. And like I said, I wanted to kind of make sure I was clear on that, because I didn't think you guys were looking to take on a bunch of new volunteer projects. But yeah, I think I've been talking with Fred a little bit about, because I mean, Fred's, I think, brought a really good perspective to the planning side of things, just from that kind of the big picture perspective, and how kind of seeing how everything ties together. And I do want to start trying to loop him more into these types of meetings to see, just see how we can kind of get, insight from that parks perspective into other things, and then also bring the parks perspective into some of these other conversations. So we can definitely, I think, try to move it that direction.
There's a lot of intersections we can look at. I mean, there's intersections with art, and there's intersection with health, and there's intersections with, transportation and public works, and all those things. And be interesting to explore those to some degree.
Mhm. Okay, yeah, I think that's a good focal point there.
And we have, like, I think the partnership with the museum on the signage, that was really great. And so there's all kinds of things like that.
Mhm.
I think even Lucky Watershed Council, right, looking at it from more the kind of natural perspective would also be good.
Yeah, and that's actually a good, hopefully for next time, I'll be bringing, we're talking to the Lucky Watershed Council about redoing the interpretive signage in Inspiration Garden. And just kind of updating that, making it more attractive in the style that we've already been putting around. So definitely something that we're looking at. So did I hear an answer on the quarterly question, quarterly versus monthly?
I think if we go to quarterly, it's going to lose a lot of momentum.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's totally fine.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to say. We could either be quarterly and have special meetings more often, or we could be monthly and it ends up, we cancel sometimes. And
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Better to have it on the books and not have it than just assume you're not going to have it and then maybe even go 6 months or 7 months.
Yeah. Well, and I'd like to maybe circle back to the board members and just kind of recommit people's intention of being on it and showing up to the meetings.
Mhm. Okay, I will definitely, I will make an effort towards that for next time. And I should be able to bring a couple of actionable pieces to the next meeting as well.
and I don't know if the technology has been a barrier, but sorry.
Go ahead.
So I'm new to this. I think one thing for me, and just my opinion, is a lot of people don't understand what the park has to offer. I think a lot of, there's the main people that go down there, but there's really not the amount of people that should be down there for as nice of a park as it is, and the things that it offers, the trails, the sports complex. You would think you would see just a ton of people down there using the facilities and enjoying it, and you don't. And so I kind of feel like it's still a hidden gem, even though even though you can see it. I think the movie in the park and music in the park, that's something that everyone knew about and it was a big hit. But the park itself, I don't know if there's a way to get people down there to experience it, because I think they would be back over and over again.
Mhm. Okay.
I don't know. I just
Yeah,
feel like a
yeah.
lot of people don't know about it.
I mean, that would actually be that would be a worthy discussion point is, yeah, what can we do to better highlight, the opportunities that there are in Riverview Park and other parks, just kind of get people more. I mean, Inspiration Garden's another one that I always chuckle every time I see it on Facebook, because there's always a bunch of people like, where is this place? Well, I haven't ever heard of this thing before.
Yeah.
Okay.
But maybe you could get like Chamber to sponsor a walk or something like that, just to get more people, because people like to, donate, do things like that, but just to get more people there. I know when they were doing like CrossFit,
Mhm.
that was kind of a big hit. People enjoyed that, and the kayaks, that was big. So getting people to come down there for a purpose, and then once they're there, they realize it's a nice park.
Yeah. That's something that's stuck with me since I was when I was in Denver. I went to Red Rocks just on a tour, not for a show, and there was a ton of people exercising there. Like you like this, it's the amphitheater, and they're all like doing stair climbs and running up and down and doing stuff, and it was like, yeah, like how do we get that going in the amphitheater?
Well, maybe talk to Curves or something like that. I know that they were doing that at the Monmouth City Park, the gym was,
Mhm.
during some of the COVID, because they could be spaced out on the yard, and but people were out there doing it.
Well, I think we tend to kind of focus on Riverview Park for everything, but it'd be also good to kind of think about how we use the other parks. Do we want to dedicate one park to, be a really fantastic park for kids, another one for dogs, another one for exercise, but because I remember like some of the Sunset Meadows and some of the other discussions we've had, people have had really strong opinions about what they want the park to be, and some of them are kind of, incompatible. I want my kid to be able to run free and not worry about dogs running free. I want dogs to run free and not have to worry about kids running free. So, I mean, if we could maybe kind of come up with an idea of how we want to use the parks and how kind of might be kind of the best appeal to draw people to the different parks as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, well then maybe I think honestly that would be a good topic of conversation for next time. Would be sort of a review of, I'd say, a review of the parks, the amenities they offer and what they're. I mean, I would even be interested just to kind of get your guys' feedback on what you think each park's sort of what its thing is, like what it's known for, and then maybe have a conversation around, how can we better, kind of get more people using these parks, or highlight the best part of this park in some way.
I'm assuming there's a map for Riverview Park, with like the sports complex and all of that, right?
We have a map of the riverfront, that's from our parks plan, and it's kind of it's a blend of sort of real and conceptual, because it's actually the image from the 20-year plan, so it shows a few things on there that aren't on there, but it also shows everything that is. And actually what you see if you go and look at the maps, the wayfinding maps, like down in Riverview Park, and then up at the boat ramp area, there's a wayfinding map that's got a map of the river. That was sort of an adapted version, and so that's probably the closest thing to a real map of the riverfront area that we have.
Okay.
And I actually, Fred is working on a map of the community that identifies where all of the different parks are for me, because that's honestly something we don't have.
That would be really nice.
That'd be a nice resource for the community, just kind of a local parks map for people to check out the different parks that they may not even know exist.
Yeah.
And then as part of the transportation, as there's more kind of connectivity between the parks too, I think that'd be nice for walkers and bikers. And
Perfect. Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good beginning point, and then I imagine we'll be able to pull some things out of that discussion that can get us on track with, especially going into the nicer weather. This is the right time to be talking about this kind of thing. Is there anything else anybody wants to talk about or put on the agenda for next time? Ready to skedaddle and enjoy the last dregs of sunshine and rain?
Yeah, it's nice to light a little bit later.
Yeah. All right. Well, I appreciate y'all showing up tonight, and we'll see how many people we can get